hospitals, big hospital systems. Big hospital system. When I was 30, I became the CFO of one of the biggest hospital companies in the U.S. And that has had a big impact on how I think about healthcare. This is I started in healthcare here, and I've been obsessed on this graph. U.S. healthcare expenditures as a percent of GDP. When I started my career here, you can see in the 25 years since 1960, healthcare costs had increased from 5% of GDP to 10% of GDP. And at that point, we thought that healthcare costs were unsustainably increasing, and that we would need to do stuff to reduce the cost of providing healthcare, or we would bankrupt society. And I have led a lot of initiatives to reduce the cost of delivering healthcare. We are far more efficient in delivering healthcare today than we were when I started in the mid-80s, largely because up till then, in at least the U.S., there was almost no incentives to decrease the cost of delivering healthcare, because almost all of it was paid for on cost-based reimbursements. In 1984, Medicare introduced the prospective payment system, where it made a difference how much it cost you to provide the services, and we started seeing a lot of emphasis on reducing the cost. We're now to here, and we're now at 18% of GDP in the past 35 years. We've gone from 10% to 18%, and I can tell you lots of stuff that has reduced the cost of providing health care. But we are still, someone entering healthcare today would be, if you're a finance guy, you would be faced with the imperative of healthcare costs are increasing at unsustainable rates, and if there's nothing that happens, we will bankrupt society. That hasn't changed. And that troubles me a great deal. And I've done a lot of exploration of cost behaviors, and I did find this data set. This data set actually has this correlation to the cost of healthcare services. Anyone like to speculate what that data set might be? I did look at, since it's the first time I've been to Norway, so I don't know too much about Norway, but I did check these two datas out. These are the Norwegian ones. Norway has about half the cost of GDP going into healthcare as the U.S., and this is about half of that. So, what explains the cost of healthcare? So, I learned this as I've explored cost behavior in healthcare. First of all, it's very information intensive. Healthcare is also very labor intensive and very capital intensive. But probably more importantly, information intensive. About over half the costs of healthcare is associated with either the acquisition or the management of information. We really can't treat people without a lot of information about how to treat them, diagnosing them correctly, guiding therapeutics, probably more, but the point is probably more cost associated with the information than the actual therapeutic modalities. highly information intensive. Associated with this is healthcare is distributed. It's inherently distributed. It's part of the problem in managing the cost of healthcare is there's no place to manage it at. People wander around seeking healthcare. And every society, people wander around. There's no central place where healthcare is delivered. Everybody seeks whatever's wrong with their body, various ways to fix it. And so inherently, we wander around. Associated with that is the health information associated with healthcare is also distributed. Every place you wander to, you leave a note of information. That information is important. And much of the challenge in managing healthcare information is that these nodes are all distributed all over the place. No central place to find the information that's needed for treatment. Associated with that is that computers are naturally centralized. If you want to manage information, you bring up computers and they're generally centralized. You want to put information in a database, and if you can get in the database, then we have lots of ways to analyze it. But if it's not in a central location, it's really hard for computers to deal with that. That being the case, healthcare requires indexing. The information is distributed, we need an index. And healthcare information is indexed every day. Because when a physician treats a body, they need to have the relevant information to treat that body. And so every physician is trained on how to interrogate the index. And that index is the patient's. Patients are the inherent indexes of healthcare. You're the only one who knows where you've wandered to. So you're the only place that we can figure out what the relevant information required to treat you is. And beyond that, you aren't even a complete index of your own life, because probably 15 to 20 years of your life, only your mother knows. So really, you and your mother are where we need to go to create a complete index. So if you want to know if I've had any surgeries, you're going to have to ask me, and I'm going to try to remember when it was that I broke an ankle and I had a surgical procedure done. 20, 30 years ago? I can't tell for sure. Maybe it's not relevant how accurate that is, but if you need to know, I'm the only one who knows. Well, Tammy knows too, because she was there. But patients are not good indexes. Patients don't remember things, and they're error prone. So, I'm interested in equipping patients to be better indexes. And that's what we hope we can do with a blockchain. So, any takers on what this data set might be? That data set is obesity. I'd never seen that data set till I started digging around. Obesity explains why healthcare costs in the United States have doubled over my career. Because the rates of obesity in the United States gone from 20% to 40% just in my career. If you look at the rates of obesity of children, they're on that same trajectory too. And that is a scary indicator. That could bankrupt society if obesity rates continue on their trajectories. All right.
What happened in 1978?
What happened in 1978?
There was an inflection point there.
McDonald's, so.
Yeah.
Actually, the data set, there was a 10-year data set, and I interpolated those points.
Okay.
That's why it's quite like that. But
Okay.
I don't know why obesity went up in 10 years that much.
Internet.
Well, I think the internet's coming in somewhere here.
But those dots you said is from Norway. What do you guys think?
What?
The dots you said these are Norwegian data points.
Yeah, your obesity rates are half of what the U.S. rates are, and your expenditures are half. I was surprised at that. I thought, I wonder if we would find similar, correlating. I don't have long data sets. It's hard to find, but yeah, it's not quite that, but about half the obesity and about half the expenditure of health care. Probably other countries it wouldn't work out quite that nice, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good slide. All right, so we're interested in making patients better indexes. And so I've been focused on this problem for 25 years. Early in my career as a CFO, I became obsessed with the problem of how do patients remember all the relevant information. And I got obsessed with how much cost we incur getting that information from patients and how much cost we incur when it's difficult to access and we get it wrong. Lots of cost. You can solve that problem where getting the right information at the right time, you get the right information at the right time, you have dramatically changed healthcare. Okay, so it's a worthy problem. I've been associated with it for 25 years. So kind of my big first association with it was around HIPAA. Anyone here heard of HIPAA? It's the privacy rules in the United States for medical information. They were passed in 1996. I helped lobby for them. Bill Clinton signed them, and the whole industry supported HIPAA. The whole industry supported HIPAA because what HIPAA provided was a uniform health identifier for patients. And as soon as Bill Clinton signed HIPAA into law, the privacy advocates killed it. Now you have to understand, when we lobbied for the universal health identifier, we got burdened with special privacy rules. So if you're going to have this, then you got to have special rules. We accepted the special rules. And when the privacy advocates killed it, we got the special rules. So we got the burdens without the benefits. And HIPAA's been a mixed bag ever since. Was it better or not to have had HIPAA? But we have HIPAA. It was in the bloom of the AIDS epidemic. And privacy advocates argued persuasively that it was unacceptable in our society that you could have one number that would unlock the medical history of a single person. That's what killed it. It actually remains authorized. The authorizing legislation remains, but each year, why the appropriation bills have a provision that prevents the federal government from implementing the Universal Health Identifier in the United States. So that's a big focus of my interest. For 25, well, actually what happened? I went to, I lobbied Congress for HIPAA when it was passed during the rulemaking process. I went to Washington and lobbied in the rulemaking process. So this is when it was dying. And I went and said to the rule makers, okay, if you're not going to let us have a single number to identify a patient, then you should let us have a directory where we could correlate all those numbers so we could cross-reference them. And the privacy advocates looked at me. They said, Calvin, we will never allow that directory to occur because you could not convince us that you could build walls high enough or put guards big enough around it that it would not get attacked. And that seared my memory. And I have been for 20 years seeking a way to answer those questions of the privacy Nazis. How do you guarantee that such a directory would not be maliciously attacked? And it's actually, so I've had that passion, how do we solve this problem? Many of these countries here, Norway already solved the problem. You did the right thing. Your costs are lower. I don't think that totally explains. Probably obesity is more explanatory. But you have a universal health identifier, and that's good. We should have one. But we're not going to get one. No prospect of this happening in the United States anytime soon. So I also have the idea that there should be a single place as your index. So your index, you ought to know what all your patient IDs are. You're going to have multiple patient IDs. You ought to know what they are and be able to give them out. And you ought to know every place you've been and how to get to the medical record so there ought to be a lifelong diary. And so this is kind of the ideas in the 1990s that led to the concept of a personal health record. I was one of the pioneers of the concept of a personal health record. As the internet emerged, it seemed like that's what you ought to put on the internet, is a personal health record. And I actually hired a team of engineers from AT&T, and we built one of the first personal health records. A single place in the healthcare information universe where information about your health could be maintained throughout your life. I've preached that sermon many times. And it's like this. So if you try to do that, the question is the who. So hospitals can't do it because hospitals only have an interest in a patient during an episode of care. Actually, doctors, same problem. They're only episodically engaged with a patient. Payers, same problem. They have longer terms, but only during enrollment periods. So they're the only entity that has a continuing lifelong interest in a person is the person themselves. And so you need to have a person, the who has to be the person. And that hasn't worked out real well. So I built one. Google built one in 2008, Google Health. These have all failed. Mine failed, Google's failed. And so when blockchain came along, I started being interested in, could the problem I've been working on for 20 years find that has persistently been unsolved? A worthy problem that has persistently been unsolved. Is it possible that blockchain creates new solution space that maybe could find a solution for it? And perhaps it could. And so I started exploring that perhaps. And I learned a few things that are interesting about blockchain. First of all, this kind of thing that you probably needs some form of common curation. It needs to be something that would be accessible I mean, it can't be a Facebook, it can't be a Google that owns it. It's got to be something, and I like this about blockchain. Blockchains are distributed, no one owns them. I'm saying the classical blockchain. That sounds interesting. Patient sovereign. So if you look at blockchain stuff, you hear lots about self-sovereignty. It's real easy to change those all to patient sovereignty. So that's the lifelong patient sovereignty. Perhaps cryptocurrency would be useful because one of the problems with this kind of with all these personal health records that have failed, they didn't fail because they're not good ideas. I was one of the earlier idea guys, and it wasn't that I don't have good ideas. It's a network problem. It's inherently a network problem. How do you create something and get people to start using it when the value of them using it doesn't inure until someone else starts using it? So this is a problem that Google really had. Google, 2008, created its Google Health, and it was, obviously good technology, had a lot of hype, and people signed up, started putting information in their Google Health. 2011, they shut it down. So I think what happened to Google Health is you enthusiastically filled out your personal health record, and then you went to the doctor. And the doctor still gave you the clipboard. And you went home and you said, what's good was Google Health. They still had to fill out the clipboard. And Google didn't solve that problem. How do you get, and so the real question is there anything in that personal health record that when you go see a doctor would compel the doctor to use it? And with Google, with my product and with Google's product, that answer was nothing. And so they did not succeed. I won't say they failed, they did not succeed. So at least blockchain has some possible interesting things. And went further into blockchain, and here's what I learned. What's cool about blockchain is the one created by Bitcoin is this idea of trustless truth. Okay? Now, Bitcoin is a ledger. I'm an accountant, and I'd never heard of trustless truth. But I started exploring what is trustless truth, and I found out that it's a very good thing. Trustless truth, something not that you don't trust, it's not trustless, but truth that you don't have to rely on trust for. You don't have to trust anyone. And this is a good super property, particularly when you're trying to keep records for parties that would like to take your stuff. There's a motivation to change the numbers. Why trustless truth is good. However, it wasn't obvious to me that the problem we needed to solve was really solvable by trustless truth. The problem that the privacy advocates told me is we need to create some way that it's invulnerable to attack. This information is invulnerable to attack. So if I were to ever create this directory of patient IDs, the problem to be solved is invulnerability to attack. And so we've conceived this idea of a universal patient index on a blockchain that would have trustless undiscoverability. Instead of this, we have undiscoverable associations. And it derives the same way Bitcoin derives. It derives from the actions of a distributed autonomous network with distributed autonomous computing agents working together in a particular protocol, like Bitcoin has miners our blockchain has players. Their purpose is to create this undiscoverable association, which associates values such that the association is undiscoverable, but the purpose of the association is realizable. It's a different thing, but it derives a super property in the same kind of way that Bitcoin does. Here's the mouthful of things that describes how the undiscoverable association works. It's quantum-resistant math products chained together with blocks connected along hidden paths only navigable by distributed autonomous computing agents working in immutable cooperation. That's all you're going to get from me on that right now, because it'd take a long time to go further than
I
that.
have a quick question. I mean, if a GP or someone want to give a service to the patient,
Yeah.
and want to use the data,
Yeah.
he has to backtrack the patient. When you make this trustless undiscoverability, don't you get this bottleneck of backtracking the patient to give the service?
What do you mean by the patient has to allow him? The patient is the one that controls these associations. And we have a thing like on a blockchain, we call it a digital health wallet. So you have the blockchain. On the blockchain, we put two things: patient IDs, which is really relevant to societies like ours that have lots of patient IDs, but also biometrics. They go on a public blockchain. They are totally uncorrelated on that blockchain. So if you wanted to put biometrics on a blockchain so you could identify patients, that's all you could put is raw biometrics. You couldn't put any identifiers, any associations. And so that's what we put on the blockchain, so it's publicly accessible, and then we correlate them through these undiscoverable associations that are managed by the digital health wallet. Another way to think about a digital health wallet is a personal health record, only with blockchain kind of keys inside. So it has a keychain of hierarchical deterministic keys to blockchain keys that are recoverable, revocable, and reusable. And then a patient sovereign repository, where things like a diary and documents can be kept. But those are off blockchain, but patient-centric. Okay, so that's the kind of blockchain we think could help solve the problem of patients being indexes in healthcare. Could make them better indexes in healthcare. So it's a little bit like a master patient index. You can conceive how you can compare it a little bit to a master patient index, except obviously a master patient index is constrained to an enterprise. Universal patient index would be unconstrained by any boundaries. And it could do a lot of interesting things. All this is good and interesting. We think we can get some traction to try to bootstrap something like this into the world. The real challenge is though it has to be bootstrapped. How would you get it adopted? So if you can conceive of this universal patient index that would be borderless, boundaryless, enterprise, country, where universal patient index. How would you get it adopted? And that's like Google Health. Google Health with good technology is on the trash heap of history. This could easily put a lot of energy into here, create some interesting technology, and it could end up on the trash heap of history. So we're really interested in the problem of how would you get it adopted. Past that. And the answer is this. This is a little bit how we describe the universal patient index, indexing healthcare with blockchain. has patient IDs and patient biometrics, but the real question is, how do you get it to emerge? And that's what we're trying to do, is create one that would emerge. Not that I go to healthcare CIOs, because I've been there and I know those guys, say, would you adopt this thing? What you will find is it's not on their roadmaps. And some of them will say, Calvin, you're trying, I tell them, I'm trying to solve the patient ID problem. These are US healthcare CIOs, and they say, never heard of that problem. I said, you know, I haven't ever heard of the problem. I said, didn't you know that's what HIPAA solved? Many of them don't know that that's in the HIPAA law, because they weren't there lobbying for the HIPAA law. But when you tell them, oh, you know that when you need to send health information to another place, you got to somehow resolve the patient ID. They say, okay, we know that's our record locator service. I said, yeah, that record locator service many times fails. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, we get about 80% good matches on that. And then there's 10% that are obviously not matched, and there's 10% that we figure out. I say, yeah, but you make errors. And we should never allow a mismatch in healthcare. No error is ever acceptable. So anyway, the answer that we think, and we'll end with this, is the one thing we could do to make this emerge is fill out medical forms. And we're going to fill out your medical forms. And just to give you a scope of the problem. So they're in the United States, I don't know how many in Norway, 1.2 billion healthcare events a year. At least. That's 6-year-old data. Of those, 70% of those, this is after $30 billion in the last decade invested in healthcare EHRs, okay? Still, 70% of those events get a clipboard. Still, 70%. You got to fill the clipboard out. So there's 800 million clipboard events in the United States. We're going to fill out those clipboards for people. And each time we fill out a clipboard, we're going to be indexing them on this index. And in time, the index will become significant. If there's enough people on the index, then healthcare will start adopting it. So here's our story. Where's the sound? What did he do? All right, so we will do this.
Ever been here? I have. Well, let me show you Form Drop. Form Drop lets you scan medical forms with your phone. Form Drop then automatically fills out your forms and faxes or emails them directly to your doctor's front desk. All you do is take your phone and scan your medical forms. Then Form Drop, using human augmented AI, maps, digitizes, and saves your blank forms on blockchain. Form Drop then fills out your forms with answers saved in Form Drop. If Form Drop encounters a question for which it doesn't know the answer, it simply prompts you for your answer, with the option to save it for the future, of course. Form Drop then automatically fills out your forms and faxes or emails them directly to your doctor's front desk. It works everywhere, anywhere, the first time. It even works when your doctor doesn't know what it is or that you're even using it. Plus, FormDrop is saving all these blank forms on the blockchain. And if anyone else is using FormDrop at your doctor's office, you won't even have to scan the forms. You just search for your doctor, hit the little fill out form button, and boom. Your forms come out before you're even done waiting in line. There you have it, folks. FormDrop can make your and possibly her life just a little bit easier.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest.
Thanks, Calvin. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, you said that it's a public blockchain, so there's some network of computers that are maintaining, and how are they incentivized?
Cryptocurrency. It's a classical blockchain, where a custom built for this problem, where just like miners get incentivized to do the mining, we'll have players incentivized to do the playing, and they'll get cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are what the patients pay to get their forms filled out.
So you'll have sort of a coin you'll make soon. That's coming.
It will be an ecosystem of cryptocurrencies.
But are you going to create your own token?
Yes.
Or are you using an existing one?
Well, we will probably curate the coins on the Ethereum network,
Mhm.
but it'll be a calibrate coin that we expect to issue in about 6 months. That will.
You mentioned in the very beginning that significant fraction of the total expenditure is spent on data handling.
Yeah.
Do you have statistics to this end?
I don't have statistics. I have just spent all my time analyzing those costs. So I mean, it's two things. When I say over 50% of the cost of healthcare is information, okay, that includes, how do you get that big? That includes all diagnostic services. It's all diagnostic services. It's about acquiring information to get all that. But probably the cost, the IT cost of a hospital, I know what that is. That's like 15% of a hospital's total costs go into IT services.
And that's uniform across all hospitals?
I would say that's uniform across U.S. hospitals. I do not know too much about outside U.S. hospitals. Yeah, that's a pretty good number. Too high. Well, it may not be too high, but it is a significant. It's a big enough number that if you can affect that, you've made a real difference.
If there are more questions, you can take in the lunch break. Thank you very much, Calvin.